Everybody, very, very warm welcome from all of us. All of us at this moment is from Ambedkar University, and for me and my colleagues at Fortis in the Psychoanalytic unit, we invite you today for what is inevitably going to be an excellent talk. But before the talk begins and Hani tells you about the speakers, I have a few things to say. Because some things have been happening or some things are going to happen, and I wanted to inform the people who are usually participants in most of these things. Today's speakers, as you know, are Dr. Harish Trivedi and Dr. Salman Akhtar. Hani will introduce them, though they need no introduction. One of the things which is happening now is something which started off actually with a conversation with Dr. Salman Akhtar in 2004 in the back of a car stuck in a traffic jam near Ghantaghar, if I'm not mistaken. At that time, he had talked about taking photographs of speakers and putting them up to create a kind of history, which idea later I saw in the newspaper when he suggested that we have a museum of the partition. What is happening now is that we are going to be putting up all the talks that happen here on YouTube. Some of them are already on YouTube in the with the name Psychoanalysis India. So it's like a virtual museum of talks that have been happening here. And soon there will be also a website called psychoanalysisindia.com where you will get to know about whatever psychoanalytical thing is happening in Delhi and hopefully in India. Also maybe to get some listings and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. Now, there are two or three things going to happen in the near future. In July in Ahmedabad, Dr. Fredrickson is coming and he will continue with the talks on ISTDP, Intensive Short-Term Dynamic Psychotherapy. That's going to be in July, right? In October, the latter part, we are going to be having a workshop with people from the Berlin Psychoanalytic Society. They're going to be talking about group relations, about various other things. So it's going to be infant observation, the analytic triad, and clinical significance of siblings. So it's going to be a workshop format that's going to be around 3 days, full days. And in February 2015, the latter part, around 20th February or so, will be the second edition of our psychoanalytic conference, which just happened in December. That's going to be an Indo-French conference, and that the second Sudhir Kakkar Prize will also be given there. In case anybody is interested to write, you can start thinking about the theme, which is the paternal in psychoanalysis and culture. So with that, I leave it to the paternals here, and Hani will introduce them, and I shall get off.
Okay, I have a couple of things to say. A monumental task to introduce the person on my left and on my right. And I'm placed safely anchored between the two of them. But it gives me immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Salman Akhtar, who, like Anurag said, really needs no introduction to many of us here, and perhaps for the younger people who have joined in this journey, he needs an introduction also. So let me go that way. First with Professor Salman Akhtar and then with Professor Harish Trivedi. What gives me immense pleasure today is that I'm remembering 2006. We had started, and for some of you who are students at Ambedkar University and Delhi University, let me go briefly, very, very briefly, not taking into the time of his talk, but into a small historical journey. 2006, we had started the Center for Psychoanalytic Studies at University of Delhi, and Dr. Salman Akhtar had delivered its inaugural address by a talk which was called The Lure of Psychoanalysis. 2007 or 2008, his memory is better than mine, so I might not say anything which he can invalidate here. He had come and he had spoken on romantic love, and the following year he had come and spoken on the whole question of lying, cheating, and gambling, and what was a psychoanalytic take on it. I could go various ways to introduce him. Of course, I could tell you this, that he has over 14 books to his credit, over 300 papers that he has written, 7 volumes of poetry, and a plethora of international awards. But I think that is not what I really want to do. I'm sure that he has heard himself being spoken like that. I would like to introduce him as a friend of the Indian psychoanalytic movement here, particularly of its Delhi endeavors. He has always been of immense support to us. And that's, what really warms the heart than what he must be achieving in international spheres. A second thing, and I have heard him talk in some smaller sessions on psychoanalytic supervision, I think he's a remarkable teacher. It's difficult to forget his lecture, and what is preserved in his lecture, as far as I think, it is an uncompromising depth and a lucidity and clarity of thought. So he maintains both of these axes alive. And the third thing that I think really to his credit goes the way in which he has tried to bring psychoanalytic concepts into ordinary life. I feel there are many, many thinkers and people who write, but they only write for a scientific audience. So, it's only the insiders who make sense of what is being said, and it's the outside which remains alienated. But I feel 2 people I have come across in my life. One is Sudhir Kakkar and the other is Salman Akhtar, whom I feel have done a great privilege to informing people about complex ideas in ways which merge with the lived realities. So a very warm welcome, sir. And on my right is Professor Harish Trivedi, whom I hope I will have greater fortune of knowing more closely. But in the last 8 to 10 years, we have met in different talks and had the opportunity. Of course, he is again a towering figure as far as the world of literature is concerned. And I could go on enumerating a lot of his books. His works span across literary works in translation, in post-colonial studies, and I think he's very well known. He was a former colleague of ours at the University of Delhi, and the first name that would come when one would think about the Department of Literature. Professor Trivedi has again, I think, to my mind, been a close associate and a friend. We were together in a conference year before last in Pondicherry on the theme of civilization and its discontents, and then recently on a theme on life after death. And Professor Trivedi once again brings to us the closeness between literature and psychoanalysis. As a student of psychoanalysis, I have thought that there is no better way to understand human psychology than exploring the depths of literature. So now I leave it to the chairperson.
Thank you very much. Actually, I wasn't very clear what my role was in this. It doesn't quite do. I've just come here from Jamia, where there has been a whole day, 2-day workshop on translating Premchand. And I had to explain to them that I had to leave them earlier than they are leaving. And I said some of my best friends are psychoanalysts. And it did not go down very well. They really wondered what was wrong with me. But it has been my good fortune over the last few years, as you've been informed, to get closer and closer to many wonderful psychoanalysts and psychologists. As we know, there are disciplinary boundaries, and despite interdisciplinary studies being all the rage and fashion, it doesn't quite happen like that. So new doors have opened before me. And what I was told by Ashok, who's not here, otherwise he would have had some questions to answer from me, was that I was supposed to introduce him and then sit back and listen to him, to Salman Akhtar. And that's what I will do, because though he's been introduced, I will introduce him in a way that only I can, which is out of a printed sheet. which is out of the biodata, because unfortunately, some more of my friends are becoming are psychoanalysts now. I met him for the first time today. I've been deprived. I've heard so much about him. I've really wondered what I had done in my past life to deserve this, not to have heard him before, but that's how it's been. And I've heard such wonderful, glowing accounts. There's the phrase about wit and wisdom, and how it's very rare to find them together. And I've heard that that's precisely what Salman Akhtar does. I'll read out a little bit. It's information to me, and I hope it'll be information to some of you. I will not read out all of it, but a bit of it. What is a bio note on him? Salman Akhtar, MD, was born in India and completed his medical and psychiatric education there. Obviously, this is for Americans. Upon arriving in the United States in 1973, he repeated his psychiatric training at the University of Virginia School of Medicine and then obtained psychoanalytic training from Philadelphia Psychological Institute. His professor, why did he repeat that? Maybe he was, did you not get it the first time? But now he's professor of psychiatry. He's professor of psychiatry at the Jefferson Medical College and a training and supervising analyst at the Psychoanalytical Center in Philadelphia. As you've been informed, he has 300 publications, including 13 books, and I will name some of them in the reverse chronological order. The most recent that's listed here first, Psychoanalytic Listening, 2012. Matters of Life and Death, no less, 2011. Immigration and Acculturation, 2011, which relates particularly to Indians who live abroad. A comprehensive dictionary of psychoanalysis. Not many can do that. But what I would like to mention is a book that I'm actually familiar with and have benefited from is an edited book that he doesn't even have the space to name. He has 40 edited or co-edited books apart from the 13 that he singly authored. And this is called Freud Along the Ganges. And this is about Indian psychiatry and psychoanalysis, and it's about the interaction between the East and the West. And it is through that book and your introduction there that I first learned about figures like Girendra Shekhar Bose, who is nothing if not a post-colonial figure who conducted substantial correspondence with Freud himself, and before writing to Freud or even before reading much of him, who had original formulations of his own about repression and about the Oedipal complex and about femininity in the personality and so on. And he brings that out perfectly lucidly. And after reading that, I've been, as somebody who doesn't know anything about psychoanalysis and psychology, but something who is interested in post-colonial, Freud is very, very sniffy in that correspondence. He is very patronizing. He says, I'm delighted that psychoanalysis is even heard of in India. And he says, your findings seem to me, what? Basically sound, or something like that. That tone is what one wishes to capture. Even in every field, we have a colonial history. And that is, the door to that was opened through his introduction to that book, Freud Along the Ganges. He's won more prizes, and he's given more plenaries and keynotes than I can read out until midnight. So we shall skip that one. He has published 7 collections of poetry. And just before over tea, I was thrilled to hear from him some of his compositions, a couple of couplets. And I think there's a lot to explore there as well, especially from my point of view. And all this is, not to mention the fact that he is actually the son of a famous Urdu poet, Janisar Akhtar. And I don't know whether he wants this mentioned. He's also the brother of Javed Akhtar, who is such a popular poet that some people think that he's not even a poet. That's the highest compliment that you can give a poet. He's so popular that people, there's some highbrows always in society. So that is His Family and Other Animals. That's the title of a book. That's the title of a book which relates very closely. A book by Gerald Darrow, as you know, about his life in Corfu, that wonderful island. He's going to talk to us about the mental zoo, the role of animals in human emotional life. And as he knows better than any one of us, and as we'll find out through his lecture, the Indian attitude to animals is substantially different, has been forever. So I look forward to listening to him. He says in this note that the following themes will figure in this talk. There are considerations that we all have at the back of our minds regarding animals. One favorite question asked to celebrities is kind of superficial questions. What is your favorite color? Where did you go last for holiday? What would you like to be reborn as? And it has to be an animal. I think chances are very strong that it will be either an animal or an insect or a bird. The kind of lives we have led this time. That's what this is leading to. So animals are very much part of our horizon. But he is talking about pets. He's talking about phobias. He's talking about religious iconography in this lecture. He's talking about children's books. And he says there will also be some jokes in his lecture. And there will also be some great poetry. So I presume that the jokes are his own, but the great poetry is by other authors. Salman Akhtar.
Okay. Can you stand and talk? Possible to stand and talk?
Very well.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Why not here?
Not very comfortable, is it?
It's but downstairs. All right, fine. Okay, well, I mean, these kinds of introductions are always good. And although I've come to believe that they should be given after the talk. That way, people find out that whether this was, this guy should have been a professor or not. Here is the situation. Let me start with one poem and two stories. And then we'll see where we go. The poem is called A Wish. A wish. I want to be like my dog. I want to be like my dog, to speak more with my eyes than with my tongue. To speak more with my eyes than with my tongue. To be delighted with a walk around the neighborhood. To never need clothes. To have no difficulty in falling asleep and wake up easily. To own a dictionary of smells. To grow old with all my favorite toys around me. And when the time comes, to be laid to rest by someone who really loved me. That's the poem. Now, two stories. In my neighborhood, there's a couple who had children, although they are roughly my age, but they had children rather late. When I became friendly with them, their daughter was 4.5 years old. Somehow, God, or most likely my mother, which is sometimes the same in Bollywood movies, has given me a quality by which all my friends' children get along very well with me. This 4.5-year girl one day comes to me and she's talking to me, uncle this, uncle that, and such. Now I, who happens to be a proud father of a wonderful artistic daughter who is in the audience, Nishat, perhaps genes travel the other way around also, and some genetic transmission happens from children to parents. So I happen to know how to draw a little bit. So one day when this little girl came to me, I said, let me draw you an animal. Bring me a piece of paper. So I drew an elephant. She said, give me the pen. She took the pen and erased the eyes brutally of the animal and giggled and laughed. This elephant is blind. So I was a little puzzled. I said, bring me another sheet of paper. Let me draw you a little owl, you know. So I drew an owl. She said, give me the pen. And she erased the eyes with some glee, the eyes of the owl, and says, this owl is blind. And then she laughed. So I said, let me try one more. So I drew a turtle. And she erased the eyes of the turtle and laughed. Now, this gradually, I would go to their house on a frequency of, say, twice a month, which is an extremely high frequency in the United States to visit anybody, you know. So I'll show up there, we'll have a few drinks, eat something. This girl got hooked on this game. She became now five and a half. A year passed, and every time I'll go to the house, she'll come running to me, Uncle, let's play that blind animals game. Our brother, who was 2 years older than her, sort of got into it willy-nilly, but not really. It was not his thing. I kept doing this, but I kept thinking as a psychoanalyst what this was about. Now, one of the things, there's some young psychoanalysts here. One of them I call today baby psychoanalyst. You know, one of the things we must never do is to talk like a psychoanalyst to friends, a spouse, you know, family, in an unsolicited manner. So I kept whatever thoughts I had about this to myself. Till a day, a party was going on in my house, and there were some 20, 30, 40 people. The mother of this little girl came to me and said, Salman, I want to ask you something. Why does, let's call the girl, make up a name, Baby. She was not called Baby, but let's call her Baby. Why does Baby play this game with you, blind animals? So I said, you know, I am very happy that you asked me this. But this is lots of people here and there's a big crowd, so we can't talk, so let's go upstairs and we'll sit in a quiet room and I'll talk to you. So I went there, closed the door, she sat down, I sat down. I said, you know, I think your daughter is seeing something that she should not see. So the mother says, what do you mean? I said, well, she's seeing something that she should not see. The mother says, like what? I said, listen, you're a grown-up woman. You're a mature woman. You're married. You have a husband. You know, you produce 2 children. Are you thinking now? She's seeing something that she should not see. At this point, the woman blushes, shakes her head. She says, first, it's impossible. And second, you are just a crazy Freudian. So, and she left the room. She left the room. After about 20 minutes, and perhaps another drink, she came to me, I need to talk with you. So I said, okay. We went upstairs again. We sat down and she says, I don't believe a word of what you're saying. And I don't believe in psychoanalysis, and I think what you're saying is just humbug. And it is not possible what you are suggesting, because we are utterly careful about this. But there's something that has occurred to me, although I know that this is wrong, and this doesn't mean anything. I said, tell me what has occurred to you. She says, I give bath to my daughter and my son together. So I said, are they naked? She said, yes. I said, she's 4.5 years old and he's nearly 7. And by that time she was 5.5, and he was like 7 or something, 1.5 years or 20 months older. I said, this practice must be stopped immediately. She said, come on, this is nonsense. I said, listen to me. I'm a doctor. I'm trying to tell you something seriously. This practice must be stopped immediately. 10, 15 days later, I go to their home. The girl walks by me. Now, there's an English word that I think this is the second time in my life I'm using it. Because, you become aware how rarely you use the word. There's a word called wanly, W-A-N-L-Y. My God, it's such a fabulous word, right? She walks by me wanly. No came. Never happened. 5 years passed. On her 10th birthday, I go to her house. I take her a gift. I call her Baby. She was not Baby, whatever her name was. I don't want to use her name. She comes. I said, listen, I brought a gift for you. Happy birthday. She says, uncle, I have a gift for you also. And she goes upstairs in her room, comes down. She has made a dachshund with white plasticine, and the dachshund has 2 black peppers as the eyes. And she says, here is a gift for you. No blind dog, a real dog with big eyes. Story number 1. Story number 2, a man who's under my care, very traumatized, very much always in pain, in deep anguish, very attached to me, and I to him. One time, for some reason, I had to take time off, and I'm seeing him with great frequency, 3-4 times a week. That's not fair. One time, but suddenly it hit me that maybe my cell phone might be on also. Before, casting a stone, I don't have a cell phone. Good. I have one, but I wouldn't know how to put it off. Okay, so now what happens is, this man is very attached to me, young man, and I, in some ways, to him, and he has been very traumatized and very hungry. And also, of course, with that amount of hunger comes inconsolability, greed, rage, and then guilt. One time, for some reason, I had to leave town on a very short notice, which is not my style. I mean, my children are always amazed. I can tell you what I'm doing on October 15th, 2015. Up to 2015, mid-2016, I know all my schedule. So, but something happened and I had to take 3 days off. I tell him, he is obviously, you could see it's as if I have stabbed him. He turns away, he's in deep, deep pain. And he's holding onto the chair and I could see his knuckles turn white. We part for 3 days. When we meet again next week, he appears very glum, very sad, and a peculiarly slightly uncanny and withdrawn. And then he reveals the following. The evening when I had told him that I would not be able to see him next week, he goes to his apartment. He lives in an apartment which is on the ground floor. So he comes out and he's sitting on the threshold of his apartment. And he doesn't know what to do. He's feeling very bored, very pained, very mentally disorganized. And there he sees a little frog. And he somehow likes the frog. And the frog appears to him a good frog. And he wants to help the frog. So he picks up the frog, brings him inside the apartment. And there, in the wash basin, in the sink, he clogs the sink, pour some water, bring some dirt, bring some grass, and put the frog there, this big frog. And then he thinks, what would the frog eat? So he finds some cereal, he breaks it in little pieces, and he puts it there, etc. And he's very happy taking care of the little frog. Then he has to take a shower. He goes to take a shower. And when he comes out of the shower, he calls for the frog and looks in the sink, and there's no frog. There's no frog. Now he calls for the frog does not answer, and he is now desperately looking for the frog. And he becomes panic-stricken and bit by bit very, very anxious and then very, very angry. He feels betrayed. He feels that all his love has been for naught, and he now wants to punish the frog. And he wants to look for the frog, and finally, by overturning a sofa, he was able to find the frog under the sofa. And he grabbed the frog in his hand and throws the frog across the wall. And then the frog runs and he runs after the frog. And a demonic battle begins between a cruel, omnipotently controlling tyrant and a deeply fragile, weak, helpless, and terrified victim. And as this frog is being thrown again and again against the wall, the frog begins to now break legs and cannot is barely crawling. At that point, this man begins to pray to God in his heart and tells the pendulum of the affect and the internal world changes. And now he prays to God that, please God, save me from becoming a murderer. I do not have this capacity. You save me from being a murderer. And he picks up the frog and, praying to God that he shouldn't squeeze the frog and kill him right in his hand, he goes out and gently throws the frog out of the window. Now, between the poem that I wrote about my little dog, Majnu, the little girl, the blind animal's game, and this is a story of abandonment, of felt betrayal, of anguish, pain, rage, emptiness, guilt, and murderous intent towards someone that one feels betrayed by. Between these three stories lies the terrain that I want you to travel with me today. The animals that surround us, little and big animals, are not only involved in minor metaphoric and symbolically communicated internal conflicts, nor in major, serious, overt actions of regressed mind during states of pain and psychopathology, but the animals play a role in our life from the onset of the life and play a very important role in child development. In a paper in 1913, paper titled Totem and Taboo, Freud has about 3/4 of a page specifically talking about this matter. Freud says that a growing infant and toddler finds more kinship with the family dog than with grown-up adults, human beings. He has a greater intuitive sense that the dog is like his brother or the cat is like his brother or sister. That rather than he seems to understand them better, the child, than understanding the adults who appear sort of strange to him. And then gradually the civilization descends upon this bond through the institution of family and severes this bond and separates man and animal as two separate categories. This separation has a price. And this separation is more in some cultures and less in some cultures, more in some religions and less in some religions. The religions that were born in desert, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they have a much faster and cleaner separation between man and animal. In fact, while they make fun of the Hindu caste system, which is not a good thing, I think, which is perhaps the only messed up thing Hindus did. They had it pretty good, but nobody can handle all goodness, so they tripped over and they created this, in my opinion, a stupid thing. But the Muslims and Jews and Christians have a macro caste system, and that is God, who's the highest, prophet, who's below God, man, who's below prophet, and animals who are below man. The Hindus don't have this kind of thing. For them, God, man, prophet, animal, same shit. Who cares? Who cares? Just put on a sari and show up for the event. That's what Hinduism is about. It doesn't require you to believe in anything, first of all. Please, Hinduism doesn't say you have to believe this thing. No. You can believe, don't believe, I don't care. You like Ganesh, he likes Ram, he likes Krishna. He thinks Ganesh is a fool, you think Ram is a fool. It's okay, just show up at the event. Put on a bindi, put on nice sari and just come to the party. So, what happens is, because Hinduism was born in terrains where man and animal were closer, and this society was agricultural, not run by desert and search for water, but a man and animal shared resources. Number one. Also because God was everywhere, and therefore God must be inside the animal also. Just the way, see, the Muslim God and the Christian God and Jewish God is up there. He's not below the podium. No. He's up there. Always up. Always up. And He's He. He's up. And He's infallible. He's all good. All good, up, and He. He's not inside me. He's not inside my wristwatch. No. He's not my inside. What? He's certainly not inside my dog or my daughter's horse. He's not inside them. The Muslim God is not there. The Jewish God is not there. The Christian God is not there. The Hindu God is a different kind of God. He can become an animal. He can become a human being. He can become a wristwatch. He can be anywhere. He can be anywhere. And he is not a he. Sometimes he is a he. Sometimes he is a she. Sometimes a he, she. Both. Ardhanareshwari. Sometimes he is a child. Bal Gopal Krishna. Do you see? Who cares? Who cares? Right? The religions of desert are religions of prose and laws and insistence upon belief and such. The religions of agricultural societies are religions of poetry, metaphor, communal sensibility. They do not require belief in anything. You may not believe in anything and still be Hindu. They are more about communal organization and communal life and ritual, not belief, ritual and such. As a result, their God also is not all good. Their gods do all kind of crazy things. Which God, think about it, if a Chinese dry cleaner tells me that my wife is having an affair, who should I believe? And my wife says I'm not having an affair. Should I believe the dry cleaner or should I believe my wife? But Lord Rama decides to go with the dry cleaner. What kind of, that's complete, that's complete humbug. That's complete humbug. So that's the situation. The gods do, the Lord Shiva comes, the boy says, please don't go in, my mother's taking a shower. He fucking cuts his head off. Now, that's not a sensible thing to do, to cut off a boy's head. Come on, be patient, sit down for a while, your wife will be out of the shower. So, these gods are actually kind of messed up. As a result, they don't need a Satan. See, Muslims and Christians and Jews, they need somebody to do bad things. Their God cannot do a bad thing, so they need somebody else to do the bad thing. The Hindus don't care. Their God will take care of everything. Because of this, the attitude about the animals became fundamentally different. Also because of the fact that the society was agricultural, because of the fact that the idea of God was different, because of the fact that the God was everywhere, and because of the belief in reincarnation. All these factors led to a different attitude that emanated in India especially, but other diasporic Hindus about animals than in Christians, Jews and Muslims, who believe that animals are below them and who believe that animals are there to serve them or under better circumstances to be eaten. Right? So that is, I think, the cultural situation. Also, of course, because of what Freud had said, that how a child's original kinship is with animals, therefore all early childhood literature involves animals. Papa bear, mama bear, and baby bear. There's no book like Papa psychoanalyst, Mama psychoanalyst, and baby psychoanalyst. There's no such thing, right? There's no such thing. Although there are baby psychoanalysts here. I met one today. They're not baby psychoanalysts, meaning they are not psychoanalyzing babies. I call them a baby. But all children's books are basically involving animal characters because the child can identify better with the animals and more easily grapple and understand what the conflicts are. Because he can see or she can see herself in the body of a bear or something, rather than in the body of a psychoanalyst, and such, or a lawyer or a surgeon, and so on and so forth. So children's literature has this. And then obviously other literature has wonderful stuff about animals. And movies. In movies, animals appear in 2 or 3 different ways. We have movies of animal adventures where the animals are extremely adventurous and idealized and very, very helpful. The greatest example is the series of movies involving this dog, Rin Tin Tin, which, by the way, was not the same dog in every movie. If you look carefully, and I know for the fact that there were at least 20 different dogs which have played some 40 Rin Tin Tin movies. Also, most of you are much, much younger here, but there was a time, I think I'm talking about 1955, 57, 58. There was, in Bollywood, there was a big couple, Jairaj and Nirupa Roy, and they used to play in movies, and one time they acted in a movie called Bazigar, and the billboards always wrote, Jairaj, Nirupa Roy, Kutta or Ghoda. That was the cast of the movie. That was serious cast of the movie. And it was not, please understand, or was not English or. They were not calling Jairaj or Nirupa Roy Kutta or Ghoda. It was A-U-R, it was not O-R. This I just made up. So now, what happens is that in children's literature, in movies, either the animals are very idealized and they are extremely helpful. Now, in any Bollywood movie, anytime the dog barks, whoa, whoa, they say, Zarur kuch hua hai. चलो इसके पीछे कुत्ता भौंक रहा है यार, भौंकता रहता है कभी कभी, ऐसा कभी कुछ हर बात इंपॉर्टेंट बात नहीं होती जब कुत्ता भौंकता है. इंस्पेक्टर रमेश फौरन चलो इसके पीछे. So that's another important thing. But the idealized animal, that's one sort of movies, the idealized animal movies. Then there are horror movies involving animals and terrifying animal movies, and obviously they can be grotesque and exaggerated and fanciful and fantasized animals, beginning from Godzilla movies. Early in 56, 57, there was a movie, just terrifying movie called Tarantula, And then later, of course, Jaws, Jaws and Stephen King's Mad Dog movie called Cujo, and so on and so forth. So there's a terrifying movie, dog movie, there's an idealized dog movie and such. And neither Bollywood nor Hollywood can come to grips with the actual nature of the animals and project all sort of anthropomorphized ideas upon. There are also a branch of movies and plays and writings where the animal is the subject of human sadism. And sadism, or at least defensive eroticism, turn into sadism. The greatest example of that is Peter Shaffer's play Equus, in which this boy is very involved with a horse and wants to blind the horse, and then there's a story behind it. But there are also, and this is, I'm very sorry to tell you, and it is a sad thing, but there's a particular genre of movies whereby a very apparently good-looking woman wearing extremely high steel heels crushes a puppy to death. And these movies have a particular market among certain kinds of sexually perverse people who love to watch the death and killing of this puppy. So there are all kinds of cultural institutions, both going from one perverse extreme through aesthetic and entertainment extreme, through further elaborations of in poetry and literature. Pablo Neruda has an extremely good poem about dogs, in which he's describing a dog, and he uses a phrase so beautiful. He looks at the dog's eyes and he says, "There are two moist question marks of inquiry." The moist question marks you die for. It's so beautiful. Moist question marks. He has a wonderful poem on cat. And Borges has stuff on it, and so there's some good stuff also. A Canadian author by the name of Marian Engel has an extremely good novel about a bear and a woman's falling in love. The woman is a librarian, and she's sent to catalog the books on a estate where a rich but a lonely man used to live, and he has died, and it's on a little island. So now there's a literary device to create an island and a castle, and those are like accoutrements where, to isolate the world and cause you, along with the character, to regress into a hypnoid state. And there, as she's cataloging the books, off and on from a book, a card falls out. It says, a bear is usually blah, blah, blah. Or the bear usually does this. And she's getting more and more interested in why these cards are there. And gradually, the guy who comes to give her some supplies every 3 days or something by a boat, he says, oh yeah, there's a bear that lives on this property. And the owner of the place was very fond of him. And gradually she runs into the bear, and there begins a love affair. And they carry on a very interesting relationship till the time they try to have sex. And when they try to have sex, all kinds of drastic and dastardly realities, and the dream breaks, and she's physically injured and terrified, and then she runs from there. But so it's a kind of how a dream can turn into a nightmare, how the erotic desire which is contained within fantasy, the moment it's turned into action, then how it meets reality, and the hollowness of perversion is revealed. But it's a very, very fascinating novel. Among the dog books, there are numerous dog books and such, and please, it suddenly hit me that I'm talking too much of dogs and horses and bears, and there must be some cat lovers in this audience. I'll come to cats, please. Yeah. So now, what happens is that among the dog books, most dog books are kind of innocent, nice, cute, how wonderful, etc., etc. The actual dog book, one is the very frightening dog book, and there's Cujo by Stephen King. But I think the best dog book is a very unusual dog book. It's a British author, J.W. Ackerley, who has a book called My Dog Tulip. And this book is about a lonely man who lives with this big female German shepherd whose name is Tulip. And this man's entire preoccupation is how to get this dog laid, how to get this dog to have sex. And it's very civilized. It's not at all perverse. It's a very, very sophisticated book. And his deep interest, and he doesn't want this dog to have sex with any dog. He wants with a very good dog. And how he goes about arranging it. And his deep interest in her getting pregnant. And when she gets pregnant, is bit by bit increasing disinterest in her puppies. And all sorts of interesting, erotic interest in this dog, but very sublime, very subtle, very sophisticated. And his rivalry and his disinterest in the 6 puppies and how he disposes them and so on and so forth. And how then he gradually turns around and he makes sure that she will never have sex again. And so on and so forth. It's a very, very fascinating book. I've read it at least twice alone and once to somebody. So it is something real good book to read. Now, something about cats, I suppose. So there is this boy. The boy is 7 years old. And the boy loves pigeons. He lives on a big estate and he has 5, 6 brothers. And he loves pigeons, and the family has pigeons. One day, a neighborhood cat comes and bites one of his pigeons and kills the pigeon. The 7-year-old boy gets extremely upset, picks the cat, and they live on a big property, and the boy walks, and there's a dry well, and he throws the cat in the well. Comes back, eats food, brother, sister, father, everything, and now the night falls, and the boy is in the bed. Now he cannot sleep. 7-year-old boy. He cannot sleep. Now he is afraid that the cat might die overnight. And he's terrified as to what he has done, and he's filled with self-loathing and remorse. So he goes to his brother, his oldest brother, who's 11. He says, please, please, can you come with me and try to take this cat out? The brother said, no, it's late night, I'm not going there. So the boy goes downstairs. This story is from India, as you can see. The boy goes downstairs, finds the cook in the family, wakes up the cook, and tells the cook that he will give him his pocket money, which like 2 rupees or 4 rupees, what was it at that time, every month, and he'll give it him for 6 months if the cook will rescue this cat. The cook says, no, you don't have to give me money, come with me. So the cook puts on a raincoat because he's afraid what the cat will do. Puts on a raincoat, puts on a gumboot, and 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, with a torch in his hand, the cook jumps in the well. And then the cat is snarling by this time. And he picks up the cat, and he comes out and throws the cat, and the cat goes. And the boy comes home and goes to fall asleep. 30 years later, he falls in love with a very catty woman. That is not true, I just made this up. Always make sure education should not be too serious. It becomes too dull. You just have to keep the audience entertained a little bit, and then they can learn a little bit. Just slip in a little education. Okay, so that's one cat story. People believe that cats are not as involved with their masters as dogs are, because dogs are much overtly displaying of their affection. But I have a particular person in treatment right now who has 2 cats, and she describes them, and she knows their behavior very well, and the way she describes it's obvious that they are very loving. They express their love in slightly different ways than dogs. Also, 2 of my mentors, one Dr. Vamik Volkan, a Turkish psychoanalyst, and one Dr. Otto Kernberg, to whom this latest book on listening is dedicated. And both have been very helpful to me. Both of them cannot write if their cat is not in the room. They really have this feline writing companion. And Otto Kernberg told me that the only ever thing that has stopped him from writing, one time his house caught fire, and the house was actually totally burnt. Fortunately, neither he nor his wife or children were in the house, but the cat was, and the cat got killed in that fire. And Kernberg told me that he was totally became only time he has had a writing block. He could not get a new cat for 3-4 months, couldn't bring himself to, and without the cat he could not write. So people can be very attached, and people can know, the cat owners know, that the cats are also very expressive in their own particular ways that are somewhat different, obviously, than dogs. Now, we are moving towards the idea of pets. Also about cats, oh God, you have to see this. Trust Bollywood, to come up with this kind of shit. And that is, there is a song that Nimmi sings in a movie. And the song, I'm almost tempted to sing, but I'm not. I'm really tempted to. Because you cannot get it without it being sung. So don't go by the quality. Actually, my cousin is sitting there, Nasir, who's a great singer. I should have prepared him to sing this song. But you cannot get the flavor of it unless it is sung. So with apologies, the song goes like this. Meow, 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 Mary. No, listen to the serious words. It's a serious song. Meow, 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 Mary Sakhi. अच्छी अच्छी मेरी सखी बोल मेरे सजना की सूरत है कैसी म्याओ 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 मेरी सखी. It's serious stuff. Meow 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 meri sakhi, and the size of each meow is just right. My brother does this kind of thing every day. He knows this kind of thing. He could tell you that each meow is just the right size. And this is a song that Nimmi is singing. In a movie where Nimmi is blind and she has a cat and she's beginning to fall in love with this man and she doesn't know what he looks like. So she's asking the cat to describe him. So it's very fantastic song. Meow, 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 meri sakhi. So there are all kinds of things. You should listen to this song. I recommend it. It's just unbelievable. What Bollywood can come up with. So there is the issue of pets. Now, why do people get pets? Some people get pets. Some people don't get pets. Why? My daughter is very fond of horses. My son is very fond of cats. Now, he had a cat actually whose name was Paul David. That was his full name, but he went by PD. So why do people get pets? Any kind of pets. I think that the desire to get pets, just like any other desire, can come from trauma or can come from health. From healthy side, it can come from identification with generative and kind parents. So that, the child says, well, my mommy and my daddy give me so much and give me so much love. Let me be like this and let me find a little animal and let me give that love. So that's the healthy dimension of acquiring pets. Identification with kind and generative parents. What is the unhealthy or traumatic side? And that is where the child feels that, look, I'm not getting enough love. So the least I can do is to give love, or to get love by vicarious means, by identifying with the animal and loving the animal. So then in that case, I will become the good mommy that I don't have, or good daddy that I don't have, and the animal will become the little me. There's a wonderful paper by Anna Freud, little read and little known paper, called Identification with the Lost Object, whereby many people have this fantasy. Many people have this fantasy, and I will be honest, I've had this fantasy also. And that is that, if my dog got lost, how sad my dog would be feeling. Now, the fact is, dog is not lost, dog is at home. But this idea is about those as parts of one's own self which have been unloved, which have wanted a good mother, which have desperately longed for maternal love and such. And we take that tragic part of ourselves, lost, forlorn part, and put it in the dog, and then imagine and have a fantasy which chills us also. That how sad the dog will feel if the dog was lost, and so on and so forth. Which, going back to literature, there's a fabulous line in Michael Ondaatje's poem. Unbelievably good line. This is a Ceylonese Dutch Canadian poet, Michael Ondaatje. And there's a line which just you say, wow. He says, all of us have dreamt of finding that lost dog. Now, that is poetry. That is poetry. Don't listen to it as prose. It wouldn't make any sense. That is poetry. All of us have dreamt of finding that lost dog. It's just mind-boggling, how a poet can write this. So now, going back now to, let's say, some thoughts about psychopathology. In psychopathology, animals are involved in all kinds of things. In obsessions, in the sense people can be, thinking about various animals. What if this happens? What if that happens? Phobias, in phobias, people can be afraid. Now, what is a phobia, and what is the difference between phobia and a fear? The difference is that the fear is a rational response. If a rabid Doberman is loose in this room, and this is wild and is rabid, or if a tiger walks in the room, just like tiger is walking around these days in Bareilly, and one leopard in Meerut. I mean, we have an interesting country for sure. So now what happens is that fear is an inordinate response to a danger. There might be a plausible danger, or might not be. But the response is, so that phobia is fear plus anxiety. Fear from outside, anxiety from inside. Fear plus anxiety is equal to phobia, right? So it's a double whammy, so to speak. So many people are terrified of things. I mean, I myself was, I think, of the 3 reasons why I left this country, 2, which I'll not tell you. One of them was, the third reason was the chipkillies. I think that if there were no chipkillies, I might still have stayed in India. Is likely. It is at least, then those 2 other reasons and the chipkilli would be competing with each other. But certainly, the chipkilli has played a profoundly important role in my life. And it drove me out of this country. And people are phobic. My son is 6 foot tall, rich boy, very successful. He's terrified of this big spider. In the bathroom, this big. I said, why don't you put your foot and kill it? He's terrified of this big spider. Obviously, it's not the spider he's afraid of. It's what the spider stands for in his unconscious, and so on and so forth. Phobia is fear plus anxiety, right? So animal phobias are there. In England, one of the most common phobias is that of pigeons. It's very common. People getting terrified of pigeons. Now you have to know that in phobias there is some phylogenetic and evolutionary foundations involved also. And that is that an animal has to meet 3 conditions before it can become potentially a phobic object. One, that the animal has to have sharp teeth or big claws. Big claws, sharp teeth. That's one characteristic, which prepares on an evolutionary basis the animal to be frightening. Second, the animal can jump. Think about it. An insect that's walking versus an insect that's jumping. That's more scary. Insect that can jump. And finally, that animal that can move fast. I mean, that's why snakes are scary. And who would develop a tortoise phobia? Think about this. I mean, you say, okay, bye, and you go. I mean, by the time you reach Karol Bagh, you have cured for 10 years. You see? There's no such thing as tortoise phobia. Come on, grow up. I mean, you're really sick of your tortoise phobic. You need some real help. Animal has to be fast moving, claws and jumping. That prepares the animal to be then anxiety to be put on top of that animal and such. Jumping insects are more frightening than non-jumping insects and so on and so forth. Then, sometimes in psychosis, in real regression, what is psychosis? Madness, lunacy, insanity. What happens in that? Very important. This is such a great sentence that I wish I had come up with. No, it's not my sentence. It's a sentence said by an American psychoanalyst by the name of Harry Stack Sullivan. Great sentence. It says, what the infant does not have, the psychotic has lost. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Think about this. What an infant does not have, the psychotic has lost. What's he talking about? Clarity between what is inside, what's outside. What is conception, what's perception. What's imagination, what's hallucination. And also the evolution of language from phonetics to denotation, to connotation, to simile, to metaphor, and so on and so forth. The child has gone up and the psychotic has gone down. So that the word representations disappear, everything becomes just a thing. In mid-70s, the New York City was terrorized. Far more terror was introduced than by a single man, than by the 9/11 destruction of World Trade Centers by Mr. Bin Laden and his cronies. Far more terror. The whole city was terrorized by a man who called himself Son of Sam. He killed 7 blonde girls, mostly in the area of Brooklyn, some in Bronx. Who was Sam? Sam was not his father. Sam was a dog. Sam was a dog of his neighbor, who this man, whose name was David Berkowitz, thought was his father, the dog. And the dog was ordering him to go kill these girls. Behind that was a lot of psychopathology from his childhood. Back to cats. Man comes to see me, says the following. Young man, good looking, handsome, maybe 30, 31 years old. He's depressed. He's doing PhD in a neighborhood university, working, and he says that he's having difficulty working in for his thesis, and he's lost interest, and he is upset, and he's finding himself depressed and anxious. As we talk, turns out that his wife just gave birth to a son who was like 2 months old or some such thing. So I'm thinking about the regular garden variety, Oedipal complex, reverse Oedipus, blah, blah. The whole Big Mac and French fries. So I'm like thinking ordinary psychoanalysis such. Man stops 25 minutes in the interview, first interview. He says, whatever I've told you is not a lie, but I'm not really here for all that. There's something very weird that's troubling me, and I'm too embarrassed and too frightened to talk about it. But that's why I'm here for. So when he says, my mind now goes to other garden variety things. But those of you who are relatively civilized, please understand I'm also a civilized person. I pay taxes. I've never been arrested. No, look, it's truthful. I've never called for an income tax extension every year. I pay taxes in time. I've never been arrested, never committed any felony, and no misdemeanor. And I'm a respected teacher and loved doctor. But I have a more weird mind than you have. So when the man says that, this is a very weird thing, I'm very frightened. So now I'm thinking what? I'm thinking, this guy perhaps goes to some weird shop and sticks his dick through a hole and a black man sucks it. Regular stuff. Or I'm thinking maybe he wears his wife's panties and dances naked in the kitchen. I'm just thinking regular stuff. This is regular stuff, right? Turns out life is not like that. Life is more strange. He says, I'm really very afraid to tell you. So I said, look, you'll tell me when you're ready, but you and I should at least notice that you have acknowledged that there's something to tell. And that's already, 1/3 of the battle. That's good. He said, is it okay if I tell you without looking at you? I said, yes. So he turns his face away and then he tells that I have a habit of chewing on cats' claws. So first I didn't understand. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, let me show you. He goes in his pocket, takes out a little vial, a little glass bottle, thin glass bottle, in which he has bitten cat's claws and collected. So it's like a little elaichis or little chewing gum. And he chews them, carries them and chews them. And he has 2 cats from which he gets this. And if he goes to a friend's house who has a cat, he'll bite the cat in privacy. And he's collected a bunch of collections on them. So when he said that, now we are psychoanalysts, we are psychotherapists, So when a patient says this kind of thing, ordinarily when you take a pebble and throw it in a lake, there's rings. Are you a psychology student? Yeah? So do you see that when you throw a pebble, the lake creates rings. A psychotherapist should be like, you throw a pebble, there are no rings. It should just go. So when the patient says such and such thing happens, I said, when did this start? Tell me more about this. So the very fact that I'm now with him, I'm not making any faces, I'm not being horrified, this is clinical work, I'm working, I'm listening, what the hell? People eat all kind of things anyway, last night I was dinner at my aunt's house and she was trying to feed me some cow's hoofs. I said, no kidding. Come on, people eat all kinds of things. I've eaten reindeer's heart, I've eaten alligator's burger, I've eaten, all kinds of things. People eat chicken, turkey, beef, pigs, frogs' legs. So what the hell? Is chewing on cat's nail? It's not our concern. Our concern is what's behind this, what the story is. What does it signify? As we talk further, he tells me that I have a second kind of thing with cats. So I said, tell me. He says, the second thing is, which I love, is the following. Which I love is that I want to pick up a cat and I bring the cat's face close, so close to me that the moist air that is coming out of cat's nostrils, that moisture I want to breathe in my nostrils, and it makes me very peaceful and very happy. Now, those of you who are in this business and those of you who are not even in this business, are understanding that there's an issue about, one has to do with breaking something, biting the nails, cutting the nails, chewing them, destroying them. The other has to do with merger, fusion, closeness, intimacy, warmth, and so on. Okay. The interview is over, next day. So I always like to see, when I see a new patient, the very next day. So I said, let's meet tomorrow and we'll talk more. So he comes. We're talking and I said, tell me something about your family background, blah, blah, blah. He says, my father is a lawyer, he does this, he does this, he does this. Oh, it's okay. I get a sense. Tell me something about your mother. He said, oh, my mother, Jesus, you don't want to know about her. I said, tell me. He's so possessive. She lives about 900 miles from here, calls me every day. I'm 31 years old. What are you doing? Did you eat food? And he's just driving me crazy. This woman is so possessive. I can feel her claws all the time digging in my arm. He has no awareness of it. He has no awareness of it when he says that. He has no conscious awareness of it when he says that. Right? Now you see? Back to psychopathology. So there's delusions, there are phobias, there are hallucinations. Hallucinations in alcohol withdrawal. You drink, and you stop drinking. One of the findings is called formications. You find bugs are crawling on your skin. Ant, you feel, and you really feel as if an animal, a little bug went through this. Which reminds me of a story which I was not intending to tell, but it's a very amazing story. Nishat, of course, knows this story, that I was actually rather bad student till third year of medical school. Quite bad, and in both ways, disinterested and getting bad grades. Because there are two kinds of bad students. One who are simply disinterested but can get good grades, and the other who might be interested but get bad grades. I was doing both. So now, one day in the class of microbiology, a professor by the name of Dr. Ashok Bal came and he says, today, no lecture. Today there will be a stat quiz, right now, examination. He goes to the board and with a chalk he write the life cycle in detail of, and everybody expecting, anopheles, some mosquito, tuberculosis, regular malaria, regular stuff. Now, the man changed my life. The man didn't change my life, the worm changed my life. He writes, you're a doctor, Dr. Vadhavan, think about this. I don't know whether you know this. The life cycle of, pauses for a second and writes Dracunculus medinensis. The house, 100 students saying they were stunned. Nobody had heard of that shit except yours truly. Why? Because I was a bad student. I was reading interesting things. I was not reading things that were important. So, what was so interesting about this worm, Dracunculus medinensis, to whom I owe a deep gratitude. I haven't met one, but if certainly a bottle of Shiva's Regal is due to him. So, what is so interesting about it? It is among the only two bugs, only two parasites that can be seen while present in the human body with naked eye. And unlike Taenia solium, for which you at least need an ulcer to pull it out or something, this goddamn worm walks across the eye. And you look and it's walking across your eye. I was so intrigued by this thing. That's why I knew. So I wrote the essay. And they used to brutally put everybody's scores, and I came first out of 100. I loved it. And then I became the second variety of bad student. Disinterested, but getting good grades. I only became a good student when I read PGI. I had good teachers like Dr. Wig, and I was interested in psychiatry. Anyway, so worm crawling, cocaine, there's this phenomena in cocaine withdrawal called the cocaine bugs, where you feel that there are insects on your body and so on. There are hallucinations, there are delusions. People can feel possessed by animals and become, there's lycanthropy, werewolf phenomena, where people can start acting like a wolf. And the whole syndrome called zoophilic metamorphosis, whereby a human being turns into an animal as it were, and such. There are sexual perversions involving animals. There are two kinds of sexual perversions, which ordinarily people dismiss as bestiality, but actually there are two separate perversions. One perversion is called zoophilia, one perversion is called zooresti. Zoophilia has to do with having an animal present and being in contact with an animal either by physical touch or by visual presence while performing sexual intercourse, and not being able to perform sexual intercourse in the absence of that animal. That's called zoophilia. Then there's a second sexual perversion called zooresti, which is having sex with the animal, and such. And there are all kinds of jokes about it, on late night TV. And the Buddy Hackett, who was kind of a crass, but in his own way, syrupy and perverse way gifted comedian, he is credited with the line that if you use one feather, you are kinky, but if you use the whole chicken, you are a pervert. So it's not bad, not entirely bad. Depends on how much pot you have smoked. Thank you, thank you. Not bad. So now, what happens is there are sexual perversions, there are delusions, there are hallucinations, there are phobias, in all many varieties, animals are involved in them. So I've told you about the ordinary childhood development. I've told you about pets and the loss of pets, which can be very searing and very painful. We have some people in the audience who have lost their pets. A dog by the name of Masti, who recently passed away, and his owners are here. And they tell that it's an extremely painful thing, and I empathize with them. It's an extremely, extremely painful thing. And then, there are advantages of being involved with animals. They can make us curious about the entire life. They can make us generative and generous and kind. And they can make us, the animals can be our play partners, playmates, and they can bring out kindness from us. Little dogs and grandchildren can make even the most boring people playful. Grandchildren and little dogs, they have the characteristic. Now, little dogs are different from big dogs, because little dogs come as your babies and they stay as your baby. Big dogs, you bring a little German Shepherd or little Golden Retriever. 7 years later, the dog is not your baby. You are the dog's baby. The dog can begin to serve a maternal function and such. In a paper called Lying Fallow, Masood Khan writes, the last line, I think, of that paper talks about the lying fallow is a emotional state where you can be quiet, you may not be doing anything, and mentation becomes slow down, and you can become quiet and quiet and quiet, and just lying on the sofa on Sunday afternoon, but that peace, and from that you regenerate. But for that state to arrive, you need somebody in the house, not in physical contact with you, not in verbal contact with you, not in olfactory contact with you, not any kind of instinctual contact. And from the ordinary psychiatric DSM perspective, that person is not related to you because he's not doing anything with you. But we know that there are silent communions between human beings and sometimes between human. And one of the things that Khan says, and I think rightly, that this state can also be evoked in the presence of a dog. I think, though, that he should have written in the presence of a large dog, because I've had a small dog, and when I was very young, I had a large dog also. And I think there's a big difference in a small dog and a large dog. I don't think you can lie fallow in the presence of a little poem like my cousin has, called Magic, unbelievably sweet dog. But I don't think a little dog creates the kind of maternal holding, because you always feel towards a little dog there's like a child and such. As against a big dog like a Saint Bernard. Now, that is like your grandmother, I can assure you. I'm not looking at you. Don't. So don't think that I was assuming any facial resemblance. So I got even with you now. So here we go. Look, I mean, we're all human beings. A little malice never hurts. Look, a little malice, not bad. It's okay. We are allowed a little jealousy, lust, malice, greed. So everything, it's okay. We're not like the Judeo-Christian God. So it's okay. It's okay. Now, I forgot to mention three main characters and a character that is less known in Hindu mythology. One is three major animals, right? And half animal figures. One is Kamadhenu, the bountiful cow, who's not only bountiful. A mother does not only mean love, 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 love. Mothers have protective and limit-setting bases also. And Kamadhenu gives a whole army to Vasishtha, who was kind of a quiet man, a rishi, who was pissed off and was hurt by this guy by the name of Karamveer. And it was the army produced by Kamadhenu that Vasishtha then goes and conquers over Karamveer. So Kamadhenu. Second is, of course, Ganesh, which has all kinds of interesting symbolism hidden behind it. Some, I think, wrongly or stated and wrongly understood by readers, by the writers of West, although I am an admirer of Wendy Doniger, great admirer. So I'm not talking Wendy Doniger, but some other people have written stuff which is, I think, half-baked and also misunderstood. But there is enormous amount of depth and interesting stories about why the Ganesha story is important. Then, of course, Hanuman. Now, I will say one thing about Hanuman. You know that Hanuman had developed a flying inhibition. You know, he couldn't fly between age 3 and 17, and serious flying phobia and flying inhibition. And why did that happen is a very interesting story. See, Hanuman was the son of Anjana and Kesari. The two guys, one woman by the name of Kesari and Anjana. Now, what happens is they were married and they were not having children. Meanwhile, Anjana goes for a walk in a garden, and there she runs into Pavan, or also called Vayu, you know, the Lord God of wind, and they have a good what should we call it? Rendezvous. You know, so I'm like, look at this. Now we're getting civilized. You know, so they have a rendezvous, and she comes home pregnant. Up to here is only adultery, no big deal. But the problem doesn't come from adultery. The problem comes from her lying and deception of her husband. Anjana tells Kesari that this is your child. Now that, a mother who's telling a huge lie, this lie is going to be passed on. This is the transgenerational transmission of trauma. Where's Zahra? This is the transgenerational transmission of trauma. So what happens is, obviously, the mother has done not only adultery, but deception. This secret is going to remain and affect the offspring. So what happens? Hanuman is born, starts to fly, and everybody's happy. And he's, that's why we now retrospectively call him Pavanaputra, because that was his father, not the person that his mother was saying is your father. But because of the maternal guilt, this boy becomes a bit obnoxious. And one day a rishi is sitting in samadhi doing puja. Hanuman goes and takes his kamandal and throws all the water and keeps flying. The rishi gets really pissed off. And the rishi says, listen, this is bullshit. This I'm not putting up with. And he curses him and he says, this boy cannot fly anymore. Now he goes walking home. The mother is devastated. This talented and unique child of hers is now become an ordinary child. So the mother is devastated. Mother goes and begs the rishi. So the rishi says, look, your boy is very obnoxious. And I will take away his powers of flying. So the mother begs and begs. So the rishi says, okay, here's one condition. I'll relent and I will allow. He'll fly. He'll be able to fly, but he would not know that he can fly. So mother says, but then how's he going to fly? But he said, but that's the best I'll do. So then they bargain again. I mean, it's like going to Delhi Heart, basically. So now what happens is they bargain, and finally the rishi says, okay, I'll relent a little bit more. And that is, the boy will be able to fly, but he shall not be in contact with his capacities to fly. He would have no awareness that he can fly. He would think that he has completely lost his ability to fly. Under one circumstance, he can regain his ability to fly. And mother asks, what is that circumstance? And the rishi says, the circumstance is that someone, man or animal, someone who has been injured and hurt in the process of life, and yet who has resilience and survival skills, and who has grown up with trauma and knows that life is full of pain and yet it can be lived in a valiant manner, that person or that animal or that human being or woman or man should look in this boy's eyes and says, you can fly. That day the boy will fly. So the mother says, but how would that person know, and which person, where should I find? He said, no more. So 15 years pass and poor Hanuman is just walking to St. Stephen's College. Do you see what I'm saying? That he is not flying anymore. He's just walking. Then Sita is kidnapped. Sita is kidnapped to Sri Lanka. And the monkeys, and the king of monkeys, Sugriv, appears, and he says to Rama, don't worry, we are monkeys. We'll go fly and bring your wife back. So they all, end up in the Kamraj country, and there near Nagarkoil, they walk further down, and they are now in Cape Comorin, now called Kanyakumari, or before also called Kanyakumari, in between Cape Comorin. When they reach there, they're totally shocked, because they thought there's, Sri Lanka is just like from here to India habitat. It turns out there's a good 60 miles or 80 miles or something. So they're totally freaked out. And no monkey can fly that far. Sugriv could, but he said, listen, I have only this much strength left that I can go, but I cannot come back. And especially carrying an adult woman on my back. Dieting or no dieting? Okay. So now, he said, I can do it. I can do it. At that time, a bear who has been shot with multiple arrows and bleeding, and who has been shot before also in life, that bear by the name of Jambavan walks by, and he says to the monkeys, what the hell are you discussing? They say, well, we don't have anybody strong enough to fly. And he looks at Hanuman. He said, what about this boy? I think he can fly. He looks strong. And that moment Hanuman goes. Right? Now this story is about transgenerational transmission of unconscious maternal guilt, which was deposited in the boy. That's why he was acting obnoxious. Because the mother had not borne the burden of and the punishment for her misdeeds. She had made the son the guilty party, and the son got punished by the father figure and forgiven by another father figure. These are the mysteries in Hindu mythology. Do you see? Not just a monkey flying in the air, but nonsense. Monkeys used to come to my grandfather's house and run away with Ovaltine boxes and eat up all the chocolate or something. That's no fun. The story is in the meanings. Hanuman, Ganesh, all these things are like visual icons. They are visual poems. You have to take the cursor of knowledge and click, and then the story will open. And behind that is the story, and which is really worshipable and idealizable. Anyway, now coming to the treatment section of psychopathology, of course, we don't generally induce a pet. We can't tell a patient that go get a dog, go get a cat. That doesn't help. It comes from within. What ends up happening is that when we are treating lonely people, abjectly self-depriving people, pained people, and such, often as they are getting better, they themselves spontaneously acquire a pet. And that's a very good movement. Also, another element of situation in treatment is that many times lonely people come and they may have a dog or a cat or a bird or a snake or a fish or something as a pet, and they talk about that pet in real deep and terms. It is not a good technique for a psychoanalyst to deconstruct that. A psychoanalyst must take that on surface. You see, the art of being psychoanalyst is knowing when not to interpret and what not to interpret. Psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic treatment is not for showing one's intelligence. That's for this kind of talk, So, right. When you're doing analysis, you have to be quiet and patient and listen and just let the patient blossom and come out with stuff and go where the person can go and so on. Also, in many mental hospitals, and which have now in West become sort of extinct, but here they still do exist. Some of my relatives have lived in there. It is true. In European Mental Hospital in Kanke, in Ranchi. In mental hospitals, often the superintendent has his dog, and the dog becomes a very important figure on the inmates of the mental hospital who have a kind of benevolent relationship. And the dog, unbeknown to itself, becomes a depository of fantasies and projections as container of fantasies and projections, and therefore a processor of a metabolizer of elements of the mind that cannot be thought about. Which brings me back to the biggest. I mentioned Ganesh and Kamadhenu, and I mentioned Hanuman. Nothing greater in Hindu mythology is about this story. This is mind-boggling. That in one version, Brahma has two children, one Prajapati and one Dharampati, one for administration, and one for thinking. It's like having a dean and a chairman, So now what happens is that this Dharampati fellow, his job is just to read, while Prajapati has to arrange the whole world. So Dharampati reads and reads and reads, and he masters all Vedas, all four Vedas. Which then, because Prajapati is interested in power, now he becomes envious of even that possession of Dharampati. So he trains a large number of his scholars and then calls Dharampati to have a contest of knowledge. And Dharampati, to everybody's surprise, shows up with 4 big dogs. And everybody's surprised, why are there 4 dogs? And he has 4 of them dogs sit in front of him. And everybody's shocked, and dogs are facing him, the guy himself. And these 4 dogs, in his mind contain the 4 Vedas. Each dog stands for, embodies Vedas. So when he's asked a question, he looks at this dog and he remembers parts of Vedas. This is the high esteem given to animals in Hinduism. Now, let me conclude this talk by a story, which is actually not a story but a fact. Dr. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, was very fond of dogs. He had 2 dogs. One was called, they were chows. One was called Lun, L-U-N, and one was called Yofi, J-O-F-I, Yofi, which is a Hebrew word for beautiful one, usually used for a girl, young girl. Now, Freud was extremely fond between the 2 of Yofi. And the only time a very educated man with great cultural knowledge, etc., but some distaste for singing and music, the only time he'll sing when Yofi would be sitting in his lap. And there's stories why that's the case, or speculations at least. When the Nazis began to destroy Jews and destroy psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic press, his international Verlag in Vienna was burnt, and they were about to kill him. 3 people, one a British psychoanalyst by the name of Ernest Jones, second a rich woman from France, Princess Mary Bonaparte, and third the American ambassador to Austria by the name of William Bullitt. These 3 people arranged a deal of, and they paid $325,000. Please understand, $325,000 was close to $10 million or $15 million in 1938, 37 actually, late 37, to the Nazis, and got Freud out, and Freud and his family out of there. When Freud came to by boat to England, the British thought that the Yofi was not well. And they said that this dog has to be in quarantine. So for about 6 weeks, Freud, who himself was ailing with cancer and quite unwell and getting very old by this time, 82 and a half, that he could not see Yofi for about 6 weeks. Anna Freud's friend, Dorothy Burlingham, bought another dog exactly looking like Yofi and gifted it to Freud. And Freud named him Wolf, and the dog remained in the family, but he never got attached to Wolf. Then 6 weeks later, Yofi came back and Freud was rejuvenated and happy. A year and a half later, Freud's condition was getting worse. The cancer had repeatedly spread and he was in severe pain. He was now on morphine, 3 times a day, morphine injections. And a time came that he became unable to talk. And then a time came that he got infected in his mouth and his palate, and he was full of pus and actually extremely foul smelling. And the only 2 people, he was a stoic and brave man, and he refused anybody to come close to him because he knew that he was very, very bad smelling. but Paula Fichtel, who was Freud's maid, and Anna Freud, who was Freud's beloved daughter. Only these two people insisted and kept taking care of him. Freud had told Max Schur, his internist, that a day will come when life will become unbearable for me, and I do not want to live an undignified life and cling on just for living's sake. That day, I will tell you that please give me more morphine and let me go. On 23rd September 1939, Freud said to Max Schur, tomorrow is the day. We wonder why Freud chose as psychoanalysts. We always wonder why. Why tomorrow? Why not 2 days from then and such? 24th September 1939 came. Max Schur came upstairs in the Freud house, talked to Anna Freud and Heinz Hartmann. 3 people talked for 15-20 minutes and made the gentlemanly agreement that this was time. And they gave Freud an injection of a very heavy dose of morphine, and 8 minutes later, Dr. Sigmund Freud was dead. As psychoanalysts, we have always wondered what led Freud to say what he said. And there are many theories about it. Many theories. There are many stories. Many psychoanalysts have tried to research about dates and its connections and what was happening on that date and this date, how these numbers fitted with his early childhood experiences. And there are many interesting stories. One story is the following. After Max Schur had just arrived, just a few minutes before Max Schur had arrived, Yofi had come from downstairs, clip, on the bedroom door, and sniffed the air and turned around and left. 2 minutes later, Max Schur arrived. Freud said, tomorrow is the day. I have a very good friend who is a very serious Darwin scholar. His name is Dr. James Anderson Thompson. He tells me that what this indicates is that the dog, Yofi, had sensed that the master was dying, and therefore the dog gave up on the master. I think it's certainly possible. But I also think that as a psychoanalyst, I believe that when the dog turned away for whatever reason, Freud could not sustain internal goodness, internal hopefulness, internal optimism. Because we need our friends, our lovers, our husbands and our wives and our mothers and fathers and our friends and our buddies, our students and our teachers to meet again and again and keep putting us in touch with our internal goodness and optimism which keeps us going. When the dog turned, Freud could not keep this internal battery alive. And it was Yofi's giving up on him that led Freud to say, tomorrow is the day. Thank you.
What a treat that was. I have 2 quick questions. Can you speak for 1 more hour? This is on behalf of the whole audience. Second is, why do you live in America? Why don't you live here so that we can hear you more often? And whom were you calling a chipkali?
That's the best. Now you see, you have many analyst friends. It shows. Certainly, obviously, the chipkali is, only sometimes a chipkali. Yeah.
Do we have
for
time
young
for
people,
questions?
it's a very important question. Do you see that? You get scared of chipkali. Why? I met for the first time a person about 10 days ago or something who's fond of chipkalis. I've never met a person like that who adores chipkalis. And it's good for me to know that such human beings exist. But obviously when you are scared of chipkalis, you have put something in the chipkali from your internal world that's terrifying you. And I'm now better with it. I think I'm better with it. Show me one and we'll find out.
We're here till 8:30? Yeah, okay. Huh? Yeah, right, okay. what has just been whispered into my ear is that all those of you who wish to ask questions should confine yourself to 10 words each. so that we hear less of you and more of Salman Akhtar. Yes? Any questions and comments? All right, 11. Yep. Yes, at the back.
Yeah, any read you would recommend vis-a-vis the topic of the talk?
Any what?
Any read?
I had edited a book. See, one day, in April 1995, pre-cell phone, at least for me, pre-cell phone, and the car's radio was off. I was driving to work, and suddenly a thought occurred to me. Thoughts will always occur to you when you are not thinking. Don't try to think, because thinking is not good. They would not create thoughts. So I wasn't thinking, and suddenly a thought occurred to me that in his entire life, Dr. Sigmund Freud has treated 4 patients by full psychoanalysis. 44 patients. 44. Of the 44 patients, 4 patients are called the famous cases. Wolfman, Ratman, Little Hans, and Dora. Now, of all these 3, of the 4 cases, 3, Wolfman, Ratman, and Little Hans, have to do with human fantasies about animals. This thought, 75% of Freud's famous cases are about animals, make me very happy. This is a good thought. You have to be vain. So I started to decide, God damn it, I'll write a book about animals. As soon as I started, I realized this was too big and too complex a topic. So when I start a book and I realize that I cannot write it, then I cheat. I edit a book. I invite 20 other people to write. And whenever I went to anybody to ask writing a chapter on a cat or a dog or a spider or birds or animals in children's literature, movies, etc., everybody said, I know nothing about it. But when they wrote, now they tell me that this is one of the best things they did. The book became very big and had to be cut into 2 parts. One is called Cultural Zoo and one is called Mental Zoo. And the book was published in 2005, but it became totally out of print and totally unavailable. But it is being republished, and by the end of this month right now, March, it'll be freely available. It's called Mental Zoo and Cultural Zoo. Carnac Books London is publishing it. And there are at least 25 different papers of different angles about animals and man. Yes, please.
Over there.
I'm sorry if I cost 11 words. You talked about phobias, and then you said they have to have claws, bite, snakes, all of these things we're scared of. But recently, if you watch Animal Planet for maybe like 4 hours, there will be at least one show that tells you about snakes being pets, snakes being loved, snakes being pets that you let children handle, and not just snakes. I'm talking about tigers in the basement. So I'd like you to comment on that idea of how now cats and dogs have suddenly become boring and mainstream.
Yeah, see, I didn't mean that all animals that have fangs and claws and can jump and have rapid speed should necessarily become phobic objects. I think that they make themselves more phylogenetically ready, hardwired parts of the brain can displace more internal stuff onto them, so certainly, but obviously there are all kind of esoteric pets. My grandfather had a tiger in the house. My grandfather's brother had 2 huge pythons in the house. The film actor Sapru, living in an apartment building in Juhu with no gates, no major contraptions of any prevention, had a bear living in his apartment. So I mean, there are all kinds of people, right? And people, it's, and you see please understand this idea that animal nature is somehow bad. Fact is, animal nature is bad and good. Human nature is bad and good, meaning that tendencies towards violence, filthiness, promiscuity, greed, lust, malice are as hardwired as propensity towards collaboration, sympathy, forgiveness, conciliation, and even sacrifice. And we see this in animals. They have cross-generational, cross-species animal love, and they are feral children raised by various kinds of animals. When I was a little boy, there was a boy by the name of Ramu who was raised by a wolf, and he was for years in Balrampur hospital. I had some kind of unconscious resemblance with him, because, but that's a deeper story.
Lord Byron, when he was a student at Cambridge, well, he wasn't a student, he was staying in Cambridge, in a Cambridge college. He had in his rooms a bear, and he was asked by somebody in authority, why do you have a bear here? He said, sir, I'm training it for a fellowship. Other questions?
And Yudhishthir, we forgot to, were you going to say the Yudhishthir thing? Pankaj?
No, I was going to ask about what do you make of emotional life of all the fans of Spider-Man, Batman, Wolverine, and Catwoman?
Yeah, I think that we have this kind of ambivalence towards animals. We project bad stuff. Some animals are considered always bad. How can that be? Some animals considered always good. We always think dogs are always good. We always think snakes are always bad. How can that be? These are all projections, right? Same way, in some cultures, some animals are considered good. In some other cultures, the same animal is considered bad. Ullu, an owl, is considered here in our language as stupid. In China, in USA, it's considered extremely wise animal, And so if you call somebody Ullu Kapatta, in China, he'll say thank you. Yeah, right? So, there's different situations. And I think that these characters are hybrid characters created out of the Judeo-Christian Islamic hunger for iconography, which the Muslims and Christians and Jews lack. You see? They deride the Hindus on one side, and even within Christians, they deride the Catholics for having a relatively richer iconographic life. But deeply, they also envy it, and they want it. So they don't have Ganesh, and they don't have Hanuman, and they don't have, all kind of animals, Therefore, Kamadhenu, and they don't have, snake around Sheshnag and snake around Shiva. So they say, well, let's make Batman. The hunger of the child, which Freud says, when the child is separated, civilization separates the child's mind from animals, there's a price for it. And that's the price we are seeing in a sublimated form. All these animal movies, yeah.
One of the 5 books in that great animal classic that we have, the Panchatantra, is in fact called Kakulukiyam, of crows and owls.
Yes.
And owls there are not ullus.
Yeah.
I don't know when that begins in
So
Indian perception.
So interesting.
And there's another thing about some owls migrating and being thought wise.
They didn't go to USA.
Yes.
One other thing I want to point out, I forgot another very important and interesting book by R.K. Narayan called A Tiger for Malgudi.
Yes.
Whereby it's written in the tiger's voice, my life in jungle, my life in circus, my life in movies, and my life in zoo. It's
And
very
there's a non-animal novel, The Man-Eater of Malgudi,
Yes,
which is
yeah.
about a human being.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Sir, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but I've benefited a lot from the psychoanalyst approach to analyzing behavior, interpreting people, because my wife is, unfortunately, we talk. I believe, like me, people in all walks of life can benefit with this line of thinking, but I have a perception that professionals in this field keep the profession very secretive or very, kind of inward focused, in
Yeah.
exclusive club. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right, and I think that has harmed psychoanalysis. I think that psychoanalysts were so intoxicated by the discovery of the unconscious and by the early discoveries of Freud that they sort of almost deliberately created a false language. In fact, there was a committee called the Informal Glossary Committee to translate Freud's words into English. Informal Glossary Committee, in which they made up words that Freud had never used, and some of them neologisms. And James Strachey, Alex Strachey, Joan Revere, and Ernest Jones. And their idea was that if they make up words, this word would have no other connotation apart from psychoanalysis. And therefore, they were kind of create this idealized and idiosyncratic language, and which I think only analysts could talk to each other. But I think in the end, it was harmful. And many, many analysts are now speaking in simpler ways. Yeah.
Salman, as a psychoanalyst, when you go to parties, when you meet people, you meet friends, and they're talking, does your mind subconsciously start analyzing them as a habit, or you take it as a normal rule?
I think up to 3 drinks. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Are you talking about the drinks you've had or the?
Yes, when people like you start talking, we are not sure whether you started
No,
analyzing
no,
us.
not at all. I'll tell you why. I've written a book just now called Psychoanalytic Listening, and in that there's a chapter called Listening in Non-Clinical Situations. I think any psychoanalyst who tries to do that is being unethical. One, there's no consent. There's no consent. You have not given me consent to listen to your unconscious. You are talking to me at the level of conscious, and that's the only consent you and I have. There's no ethical consent for me to use my medical knowledge with you without your consent. Second, that there's no purpose. What would I get out of that? You know, and thirdly, there's a huge risk of being wrong, because if you, let's suppose, even if you right now make a slip of tongue, you know, I don't know why you made that slip of tongue. What were you thinking before? What will you be thinking 5 minutes from now? How does it relate to your childhood? How does it relate to what happened last night? What dream you had last night? I don't have any data. So, I mean, I can make a guess, but what is the purpose of that? What's the purpose of that? I mean, think about this as a surgeon. Let's suppose you're a surgeon, and somebody walks in a party with a big bump on his head or a bandage or something. As a surgeon, it's possible that if fleeting thought might occur in your mind, what broke and what got fixed or something, but you will not be sure. And certainly you'll not go up to that guy and start talking about what happened to him. He's not asking you, right? So that there's no purpose, there's no ethics, and there's no huge risk of being wrong. You know, psychoanalysis requires a big data, and you know, there are people who they're psychoanalysts, and I know some who talk to their children or their husbands and wives constantly like an analyst, and that is, I think, a sadism and cruelty disguised as psychoanalysis. You know, what one should take from one's profession to home is quietness, patience, listening to others, reliability, empathy, decency, honesty. That's all. Not interpretation, and because we don't have data. We don't have data.
Now, all those parameters are exactly the professional ones.
Yeah.
But I suppose the question was, do psychoanalysts also have a subconscious?
Of course. Of course. I mean, you know, look, I was going to bring that book for you. I forgot it. I was not intending
That's
to
very
forget it.
deeply Freudian.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hypothesis why I forgot it. 1 or 2, but there might be more.
Yes, in front, please. Sorry, who else?
Parvez.
Over there? Yeah, go ahead. And after that, I'll come to you.
You have
Yeah.
also written about the impact of these animal sounds, and particularly on those people who migrate, for example, from India.
Yeah.
Every day we see elephants, cows, etc.
Yes.
And then once you end up in London or anywhere,
Yes.
maybe in the USA, you miss those catlets.
Yes.
What is that impact?
I think there does happen a loss, and that's why you'll find in the third world poets living abroad that in the poetry there are a lot of animals. There are much more animal references, and I think that something gets lost. I mean, just even take a thing. Let's suppose, I mean, you have lived in London, so you're not familiar with this example, and that is a red-colored mailbox. You know, I live in USA where mailboxes are blue. Now, I use them, I put letters in them, but they don't do anything to me. They don't do anything to me. I go to England, I see a red mailbox, I feel so happy. You know, it just makes me feel happy. First time I was in Bermuda and I saw a red mailbox, I got a picture taken with the mailbox. Yeah, it's like, so it's one of those things. Same thing I think with the animals. You know, that the street animals have a role to play in our in lives. They can be sex teachers. A lot of older people have learned sexual techniques from all the street animals. They were sex therapists, you know. Then serious. You guys are young. You know that you have had other means to learn. You know, but I'm talking about people of older age. They are sex therapists. They are containers of jokes. They are containers of fantasies. And they become our partners. I mean, for a long time, I thought that the grocer by the name of Ramji Lal, who was a bania, who had a shop in one of two garages that we had in our house. We had no cars, but we had two garages. You know, so one was converted. And Ramji Lal used to bring a cow and tie it to the tree in front of the house. I was quite convinced that the cow was actually my mother. You know, it was not a bad conviction. It helped me. It helped me. And I think that, the provision of dogs, cats, cows, so on, I think it lets the child have a richer fantasy life, a more nuanced and textured fantasy life, and a deeper contact with the reality of the universe, I think. I think there's a difference. I mean, look, a kid growing up in Manhattan, it's even possible that a kid wakes up on Monday morning and goes to sleep on Friday evening, has not seen moon. Now, that's it. People asked me when I went to USA in the beginning, are there cows on the street of India? And I used to get very embarrassed and shy. I don't get shy about this at all. I said, yes, there are cows on some streets, and there are dogs also, and cats, donkeys, pigs, and mice, rat, and ducks and geese. And sometimes if you're lucky, you'll see a buffalo and a bear. And if you're really lucky, monkeys, and it's possible to see camels and elephants. Is there something wrong, officer? Yeah? I mean, does God intend like a road to bifurcate? Man this way, animal this way? I mean, what is better than having a cow on the street or not having seen a cow for the last 6 years? I mean, that's also bizarre. By the way, as we were driving, my daughter and I, she pointed out, and I think her observation was astute. She said, Dad, there are less cows on the street now. There is, I mean, I don't know whether you guys notice it or not. There are less cows. What have you done? Eaten them up? Yeah?
Don't answer him. Don't make the mistake. Yes, the lady here.
My thing is about how psychoanalytic therapy used to be long term.
Yes.
And I remember once Alan Rowland had come and he was talking about dream analysis, and he talked about a case which was like for 27 years with him.
Yes.
And with time changing and brief therapies and this whole movement.
Yes.
And everybody's in a hurry.
Yes.
My question is, how do you, as a practicing psychoanalyst, deal with this issue of people wanting to kind of deal with issues faster and faster? And to what extent do we really compromise with the whole authenticity of the approach, which demanded really going to the deeper recesses, and that takes time? So what is the present scene, since I'm not into really practicing psychoanalysis or knowing much about how one deals with these compromises one has to make with time?
See, I mean, when Freud started psychoanalysis, the average length of treatment was between 4 months to 1.5 years. This phenomena of having enlarged and long-term psychoanalysis is actually a typically quintessentially American phenomena. Related, and there are many kinds of reasons, we don't have to go into that. I am not a believer in 26 years treatment. I think that's like saying that my sister-in-law is pregnant for the last 4 years. I mean, a pregnancy should not last that long. I think a psychoanalysis should not last. That does not mean that there are not people who need treatment for 27 years. Please, there are people who need treatment for the rest of their life. But that's not psychoanalysis. Let's not call that psychoanalysis. There's some version of either corrupted, insipid addiction developing between people, which the analyst has not challenged and broken, or that was a wrong choice of a patient who was not analyzable and has money, and therefore the analyst is keeping the patient in treatment, or that patient has deep problems which should not have been treated by psychoanalysis but with psychotherapy, or psychotherapy and or medication or without medication. So I'm not a believer in this kind of thing. I believe that a reasonably analyzable person under reasonably deft hands, need any decent analysis 4 to 5 times a week. It would last at best 5.5 years. That's about it. If it is going more than that, there's something gone astray. Something's already gone astray. I'm not a believer in having a person on the couch for five times a week for 27 years. I think that's completely, in my opinion, an unbelievably wrong thing.
Were you about, the lady behind, were you about to say something? No. Right, last question at the back there. Yeah.
So I was just thinking of flipping the coin, and is it possible to also think about the role of humans in the animals world? My example is in the sense that if you look at a puppy, for example, its mother is us if we adopt them at birth, right? So I'm trying to ask you, for example, leaving a dog alone at home all day long, the sense of abandonment happening over there, do animals also have an unconscious?
I don't know about unconscious, but they certainly have a mind, you know. I mean, look, if you have a 6-month-old baby in your lap, you look at the baby cannot speak in English or in Hindi or in Urdu or Bengali, but the baby is thinking, certainly, right? Baby is thinking in some language that we don't yet know. But the baby is thinking. The baby is affected by what's going on, and baby is trying to make sense and convey both speaking and thinking. Same thing with dogs. My own dog is generally well behaved, and every single time he is ill behaved is because I'm not thinking, paying attention to him. You know, there's an empathic failure. And there's no such thing if you have a dog as you and the dog. There's you dog, so to speak. There's a dual unity. You see, when you fall in love, you are dating this person, you say I, and the person says you, and that person says I and you. So there's I and you. But a day comes by mistake or somehow the word we pops up from your mouth. We should be doing this. That's the beginning of love. When this woman that you're interested in uses the word we, don't try to catch that butterfly with greed. Let her say we more times. You see what I'm saying? So just stay with that. Same way, this man-pet relationship, the best paper there is about this situation, what you're talking about, an extremely good paper, is called The Man-Dog, Man-Dog, by Stefano Bolognini, Bolognini. Stefano Bolognini, Italian psychoanalyst. It's called The Man-Dog. Read that paper. It's a not technical psychoanalytic paper, although he's a psychoanalyst. Very fine.
I suppose it's time to conclude. We've all have had a treat, and we've also had so much to think about. And one of course sure sign of a good lecture being very good indeed is that it sets the mind running along those many paths, some of which we can follow and some we cannot. In my own mind, two or three thoughts. One about him taking Rama to the cleaners, and of course you did a very good job of that. But the relationship between Rama and Hanuman is not what is depicted to be in that painting or image called Ram Darbar, where Ram is kneeling on one side, hands folded. Tulsidas reformulates this in the Ramcharitmanas and also in Hanuman Chalisa. Jai Hanuman, Gyan Gun Sagar. Gyan is the first quality of Hanuman, and in the Ramcharitmanas is even better. The very first shloka. Varnanam artha sanghanam rasanam chandasamapi mangalanam chakartaro kavishwar kapishwarau. Two persons are praised in the very first shloka. They are invoked as models, inspirations. One is Valmiki, Kavishwara, who first narrated the Rama story. The other is Kapishwara, Hanuman. Because Tulsidas knows, and everybody of us should know, that according to a very strong legend, Hanumana was the first eyewitness narrator of the Rama story. And only then came Valmiki. So his wisdom, of the kind that people are asking questions about and doubting whether animals have a mind, whether they have wisdom, whether they have conscious and subconscious, about gods and animals, all kinds of gods, their vehicles are always animals or birds. Gods can't get anywhere without their vehicles. And there's a wonderful story by Kipling, The Bridge Builders, in which there is a conference of the gods to decide whether to allow the British to defile the Ganges by building a bridge over it. And the gods themselves don't come. They send their vehicles to have a conference on the banks of the Ganga. And there's a long, long discussion between these representatives of the gods about the pros and cons of that. And of course, talking of Kipling, there's that classic book, The Jungle Books. And there, the formulation is very different. The wish of opting out, being an animal, having a totally animal world with one human, mediating between the two. In your talk, there were so many totally suggestive and evocative materials, but there was also an elephant in the room, which is the elephant. About the elephant, the Indian imagination is seized with the elephant in a way that the Westerners will never understand. If there is one characteristic Indian animal, iconic Indian animal, it has to be the elephant. Not only because of Gajgamini, but because it's also Airavat. It's also the most graceful and again, extremely wise animal with a long memory and using that memory judiciously. Again, there are such magnificent descriptions of elephants. Some in the Panchatantra, for example, which I think should be part of common consciousness in many ways. Finally, one thing I'd say, it was mentioned that I'm also not only into post-colonial, but also into translation. How to translate animals. I'll give you one very good example. In Shakespeare, in Othello, right at the beginning, Iago goes to Brabantio's house in the middle of the night and kicks up a huge hullabaloo. So Brabantio comes out and says, "Who's waking me up?" And he wants to provoke her into taking action against this black upstart, Othello. And he says, "Where is your daughter?" he asked Brabantio, which is Desdemona. And he says, I've just found out she's not at home. And then he tells Brabantio what's happening to her. Even now, very now, an old black ram is stopping your white ewe. An old ram is stopping, having sex with, the more accurate words, beginning with F, your white ewe. The association of innocence with lambs is deeply Christian, deeply Western. But when Othello is translated by a person whose son you may have heard of, Harivansh Rai Bachchan, Bachchan says, "Abhi is समय कहीं तुम्हारी उजली बछिया सी कन्या पर काला मोटा सांड चढ़ा है." It's the same emotion. It's the same emotional equivalent. It's not literal equivalent.
Yes.
And this illustrates the point that you began with, that associations with animals may be quite radically different in different cultures. What is innocence? What is cunning? What is beneficence? And so on. Finally, we have heard many lectures, all of us listened to many lecturers, many scholars. You came desperately close to giving us all the 9 rasas. It was not only hasya, it was not only shanta, it was also adbhut, and there was some sexy talk which was shringara. Then there was also, of course, overriding everything, not overriding, but spicing up everything, the hasya rasa. This is fantastic. Come again and again and give us the pleasure of listening to you again. Give him a big hand.
Look at this.
Give it to him. What have I done?
Peacock like this, peacock.
Yeah, another animal.
Yeah.
Sorry to see it like this. I thought it was banned.
And you comments were wonderful.
Just one feather, not the entire peacock.
Okay. Oh yes, thank you. Yeah. Is it switch on? Well, I wouldn't know how to turn this. Thank you. Do you have a card? This card?
I have a card in which everything is inaccurate except my phone number and email.